Certainly. So I'm the head of the office as a CTO for Suse, and also spend a lot of time focused on the Americas from a customer's standpoint and interacting with customers. Suse as a company goes back into the early 90s. One of the original pioneers in open source and Linux, and through the years have really focused on an enterprise-grade platform of open source projects and products distributions. And today have a portfolio that consists of our Suse Linux Enterprise and our Rancher Enterprise Container Management portfolio. I did in both computer science and business. Even back then I saw the potential and the impact that businesses were really being driven by the ability to innovate through software.
Awesome.
So I thought that was a great combination to be able to understand both business needs and apply the computer to their problems.
What led you into computer science? Because back in the early 80s, computer science wasn't a very popular major.
It wasn't like it was today. People didn't recognize it. But for me, it started in high school. Okay. I took a programming class in high school on the Apple II, and I just found it fascinating what computers could do, even as simple as they were back then. As a project in high school, we wrote a program to manage student class scheduling for my high school. That hooked me on it. And just kind of thinking about everything that can be accomplished with a computer versus historically doing things manually, especially back in the 80s. When almost everything was manual and on paper.
When you were in college, you took a double major. So did you always have in mind that what you're going to do later in life, or is it the other case?
Yeah. Back in my 20s, I didn't really have a long-term plan.
Okay.
It was very much, I enjoyed the problem solving.
Okay.
And looking at what's the next problem to do and learning the next piece of technology. And so it really wasn't until about 10 years later that I started to actually come up with a master plan of where I wanted to go and thinking about long-term goals and what I wanted to achieve. So.
All right. So, from a student, and you later became a developer and distinguished engineer, and later going to the management role, and eventually CTO of a major IT corporation. How does your perspective on the industry changes when you go through different stages?
Along the way. And while each has been about solving problems, what I see is the scope and the time frame that you're dealing with changes. As a developer, the focus is really delivering against an immediate set of requirements. Interacting with your customer and what can you do for them now, and most often just solving a fairly narrow set of problems.
Okay.
And then one of the pluses of that world is really your output is immediately tangible. You can see if it works or it doesn't, and you get feedback from your customers. As you move into management, it really shifts the focus to really solving your problem solving really changes. It really becomes problem solving for your team. Do they have the right tools, the skills, problem definition? Cooperation for other teams, be your focus. You also have to begin juggling more tasks and balancing your available time frame. And then the move to a CTO really shifts the time horizon that you work with, and the scope of the problems. You have to be thinking a generation or two ahead. You take as a basis what are the current problems that people are dealing with, that customers are dealing with, that you see. And then aligning that with the technologies you see on the horizon, or helping to find the technologies that it can be. And it really also takes a portfolio view versus a single project. So that's kind of how I see the evolution, as people move through their career and the different stages and focus that concentrating on.
Yeah. Sometimes if a company stays too focused on the current horizon, it might miss the second or third horizon. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot. Yeah, if you're working on strategy and portfolio that really is trying to shape a 2 or 3 year horizon, once that foundation is laid, you really hand it over to somebody else for the execution.
Yes.
And you don't see the results of that for a significant period of time.
Yeah.
Which can definitely be a challenge for some people, as they think about how their career goes. What's the motivator, and is that immediate feedback needed, for an individual's satisfaction and excitement?
A lot of us college students or junior developers, they might think that, well, as long as I know programming, I am the king of the world, I can solve all the problems.
Yeah.
But sometimes when you move into a big team, or when you move into a leadership position or management position, it's not only the code, even though the code is essential, but it's really other skills. Could you comment on some of the soft skills that you think are essential?
I don't think this can be overemphasized. I think the absolute best leaders aren't just for their technical skills. It's really the soft skills that set them apart. And some of the most technical people that try to stay technical as they move into, say, more senior or management positions, they're probably the most challenged in their leadership style. So I think it's really the people skills become more important than the technical skills. And some examples, you have very high performers.
Yes.
And you got to think about, how do you challenge them? And how do you reward them to keep them motivated, to keep them challenged with that next thing?
Okay.
Then also you're going to have your low performers or lower performers. And how do you guide them, train them, and to build their skills and be productive and learn from their setbacks, so they become encouraged and a more productive contributor to the team versus a drag on the team. So, it's your responsibility as a manager to help manage that as well. So you get both ends of the spectrum on those people skills. And then the peer groups that your teams have to interact with, can you get cooperation from them? There becomes a lot of influencing, to convince extended teams to work with your team for mutual goals. And I think those are the skills, that challenge people every day in a management role. They need to be developed throughout the career as you're going. And unfortunately, there's not an ideal class. It's also something you just don't go to a class and learn.
So, we are in the tech industry. So from your perspective, so why open source is now the leading practice that drives innovation in our IT industry now? Rob, because you mentioned you learned programming in Apple II. That's not an open source project. And then I learned programming on Windows, right? That's my professional career. That's not open source. But nowadays, it's all open source.
Of engineers to collaborate, really the world's best engineers, to collaborate with peers. And once somebody gets an idea and starts to float that kind of among the industry, it just naturally gravitates people to it. And so I think that's really the fuel that gets it going. And then as the diverse community comes together with the diversity in their experiences, the environments that they work in, etc., provides a lot more value in solving those problems versus if you've just got a small team that sits in a back room working in their isolated environment. Getting that real world exposure and the breadth of exposure that open source does. And I think it's through this collaboration at scale and the diversity of experiences and environments that really enable such rapid iteration and innovation that open source is now delivering.
Yeah. Great. I think the more people participate in the project, the better. The higher chance that you will get bugs fixed, improve to the next level. But to the enterprise level product, some people might have concerns, say, well, I'm an enterprise. So how do you solve that concern from those enterprise customers?
Sometimes if we're immersed in open source, like many of us are, we forget that there's people that don't live it every day.
Yes.
I was on a panel, finance industry panel, this last week, and we were discussing that, and the number of companies that were participating that said there was still extreme concerns. So I'd like to summarize it into this, is that, facilitating, for an enterprise to be successful, it really has to be about facilitating that open collaboration while having the necessary controls and governance to ensure quality and security. Because I think those are the concerns. Clearly, we want to encourage participation as broadly as possible, getting the diversity and experiences that we were just talking about. However, the project still needs direction and oversight.
Yes.
Everyone needs to be working toward common goals to avoid it becoming fragmented. So that's one key aspect for enterprise development, is what is the goal, and is everybody on the same page?
Yes.
And second is the processes that ensure the integrity and security of the project. You still have to have, diligence in submission gates, verifying the quality of the code being submitted, that it's been vetted for secure coding practices, that it's tested for vulnerabilities. Then open source can be as or even more secure.
Yes.
Because it has had so many eyeballs on it, that it has had that vetting process. I think one of the things really that's been impressive about the open source community is how fast the reaction can occur. From the moment something's really discovered, the collaboration that immediately comes to the table to resolve it and distribute it as broadly as possible is just extremely impressive. And you can imagine if you're in a proprietary environment, something like that's discovered, how many people can you put on it to solve it? You've got a very limited resource base.
Also, another trend that is getting more and more stronger is cloud native. And then the first clear definition is about 7-8 years ago. But right nowadays, everybody talking about cloud native. So many people have different definitions, right, about this new thing called cloud native. So what is your definition, or what is Suse's definition of cloud native?
How I see it is, and really to try to keep it simple, I view cloud native, it's not about a product or a place or a cloud. It's really about a combination of processes, enabling technologies that allow an enterprise to build and rapidly iterate applications with the ability to dynamically scale. They're inherently resilient to infrastructure failures and changes, and portable to an operational domain that's needed to fit the experiential need of the application. And that means it may run in a public cloud, it may run in a private data center, or widely distributed across a wide range of edge nodes. It's clear that cloud native is evolving very rapidly. I don't see the definition itself is changing. Because I think when I go back to, say, Matt Slang's book, he commented on this very specifically, is that it wasn't about the technologies. It's about the convergence of numerous ideas that enable these sets of capabilities, whether it's DevOps or microservices, agile development, or continuous delivery. It's as much about company culture and processes.
You mentioned that as from the perspective of a CTO, you look at the second or third horizon. So in the next decade or two, what do you think that cloud native or the overall cloud technology will impact certain industry? Like what industry will be affected the most, in your opinion?
All of them being profoundly impacted and disrupted if they don't take advantage of it.
Okay.
Today, every industry, every company is becoming a software company.
Yes.
Okay? Mm-hmm. Whether you're in manufacturing or in retail, and you may think about it in the old term, that, I build widgets.
Yes.
Right? When we think about that, there's the software that is controlling how those are done. It's software that's controlling your supply chain. It's software that's managing the downstream logistics. And you can find those examples in every industry. So every company needs to become a software company, being able to rapidly deliver applications, rapidly respond to changes in whether it's the vertical industry environment, the macroeconomic environment, the social environment. We just went through this pandemic.
Yes.
Where if you weren't able to change your business tomorrow, then many people had to just stop.
It heavily depends on concrete, real-world things like oil industry. Like I imagine in Texas, there's a lot of oil infrastructure. But how will cloud native benefit them?
I'm glad you bring up oil, because cloud native is really well suited to be the edge, because you want small applications that you can dynamically change in a very easy fashion. That at the remote site, they're immutable, that nobody can change it. Right?
Okay.
And so that picks up some of those cloud native methodologies. I've got a central way to rapidly distribute and iterate on my application.
Yes.
On very small devices. So I want containers. I like Kubernetes for the orchestration and orchestration at scale. Because I now have software controlling oil heads and the flow through pipelines and so forth. So again, they saw themselves as a software company.
Interesting.
All of the controls and the efficiencies that they can gain by the software and applications that they deliver. And they're far-flung in very remote places, as we know.
Yes.
Oil and gas is, it could be in the middle of the ocean. Where it's not easy to get an IT tech to show up tomorrow to fix something.
Yeah. Great. So then as a programmer, how can I prepare for this cloud native era?
I think the major skills that are going to be important to develop are really about some of the methodologies.
Methodology. Okay.
DevOps, CI/CD, microservices, architectures are critical to achieve the full value of cloud native. If you want to be iterating on applications, on a daily, weekly, going back, to waterfall, when you might update an application, quarterly or annually.
Yes.
People now want to be able to push new capabilities, on a daily, weekly cycle.
Yes.
And so it's important to understand those processes and the tools around those. And it's not a single tool necessarily, but there's numerous ones out there. And we as an industry are trying to programmer, on the other hand, they've got a lot of new things to learn.
Okay.
Right? The containers and Kubernetes, I think are here to stay. And over the next decade, will just continue to mature and advance. And IT infrastructure programmers need to be conversant in those technologies.
When we talk about cloud and cloud native, people talk a lot about tools like DevOps, CI/CD. Seems like people are building pipelines. One question that the outsider of the open source, especially enterprise open source projects, they might always wonder. So since it's open source, how can people make money out of it? So if you
on the broad aspect of what makes one company more successful than another, Obviously open source is available to everyone. So the business is about adding value beyond the source code. The value and the business value, the value to your customers isn't in the source. And at Suse, we deliver this value by providing thoroughly validated and secure distributions of numerous open source projects. Let me give examples in both spaces. Linux isn't just about going to linux.org and downloading the source code. There are thousands in a Linux distribution. There are thousands of other projects that all get combined with the Linux kernel to make a distribution.
Yes.
In a Kubernetes or a container management platform, it's not just Kubernetes that's in it. It's about managing the Kubernetes, plus you need monitoring and observability capabilities, you need deployment, you need lifecycle management, you need security, and combining all of those in a platform that's robust and secure. That's where the value comes. So are you providing business value, a service to your customers that they value that's beyond just the source code? And so we alleviate, the customer from having to be an expert in and track all the lifecycle changes, of these dozens or hundreds of independent projects. And then we pride ourselves on providing world-class support of these distributions and the underlying open source projects. And this is what our customers find extremely valuable and look to Suse as a strategic partner in their business. And then, which allows what we've already mentioned, it allows the customer to focus on their business and not the business of open source. For anybody getting into the open source and wants to make a business out of it, that's the thing to focus on. What value are you providing to your customers? That's not about the source code. It's about how do you help them? How do you service them? How do you make their job easier?